much. Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, John's just presented me with the report from the Independent Review Committee. And I've got to say, John, I'm delighted to receive this report. Just talking to John beforehand, I know that they've done a really thorough job in preparing this document. This document they've received 149 submissions from various stakeholder groups, industry groups and the general public, so there's been a huge response to this review. I wanted to make sure this was an independent review, and it has been that, so I've just received this report now, and I really look forward now to going through the report, looking at the recommendations and the findings. And can I just say, John, and then absorbing all of that, because there's been so much in here, so that we can make sure we make informed decisions. Can I take the opportunity to thank John Atkins and his committee. John Atkins was the chair of the committee, Nicole Roque and Ian Stanley were committee members, and Donna Kennedy was the executive officer. The huge response that we have had to this review has meant that they've had a heap of work to do, a heap of their time. I thank you very much, John, for the time you've given, the amount of work. I think when we started this, I said to John, it's going to be a big job, and John realised that, but I don't think you quite realised how big it was going to be. But that huge response has been great, because it enables us now to get this comprehensive report. The last review was done in 2007, and of course since then time moves on and things change, and I know there's been great public interest, particularly on the objectives and the effectiveness of the Act, and that's why I wanted this review to be done, to inform government, so we can make good decisions. So John, thank you for all the work you've done. Today, because I've only just received the report, I won't be making comment on the recommendations and findings, as I need to read them and get to understand them. But what I will say is, I understand in here is 141 recommendations in this 270-page comprehensive document. So 141 recommendations, there's a bit of work to be done. And what I'll do now, I'll hand over to the chairman of the review committee, John Atkins, to make some comments. Then I'll come back and go through with you the course that government will take from here. John?
Thanks very much, Minister. As the Minister said, we received 149 submissions. We met with a number of organisations and individuals that made submissions. We also travelled to New Zealand and Victoria and New South Wales to understand what was happening in their regimes. We have met many times, and the result of that is this report. Can I just say, in broad overview, there is a reason that we regulate the supply and consumption of liquor in our society, and that primarily relates to the potential for liquor when consumed to cause harm. So in conducting this review, we have looked very carefully at that, realising of course that the legitimate concerns of the community and their ability to access alcohol need also to be considered when and balanced against harm and the potential for harm. Alongside that, of course, there is a desire by industry participants to be able to carry on their businesses free from unnecessary regulation and overbearing compliance. That has had to be balanced as well. Further, there have been considerable community concern around juveniles and their access to alcohol. At the same time, community members have wanted a greater degree of community engagement in the process of granting of licences. All of these things, and finally, our culture towards and attitudes towards drinking are matters that we have sought to address in this report. There are 141 different recommendations, as the Minister has said. I encourage all industry participants and all people that are interested in this to look at the whole report and try. We believe we have sought to achieve and have achieved some sort of balance, and one particular recommendation shouldn't be considered in isolation. It's the balance that we've sought to achieve. So I won't be making any particular comments on any particular recommendation, because we do believe that the whole report needs to be considered together. So I'd like to thank again Nicole and Ian for their work, and Donna Kennedy for her work in supporting us. We believe that we've got a report that government will consider carefully, and we hope that out of that consideration will come some change, but we have no expectation with respect to change. It's now over to government and government processes to consider the report and the input of others. That's all.
Mr. Akers, has it been a tough balance to strike given the backdrop of alcohol-fuelled violence that we've had in the news? And
there are 149 submissions, as you can imagine. There's a wide range of views amongst those submissions. We've sought to seek a balance. Community concerns are obviously one of those issues, and we believe that we've addressed those as best we can as a committee.
Was it disappointing that it had been delayed 3 times, or was that the pure volume of work that you're working through?
I don't think it was disappointing. There was a lot of work to be done, and we did it as well as we could. We spent a lot of time on it.
The laws surrounding juveniles, it looks like we've only had a bit of time to flick through it, but you have made a recommendation that it be made an offence to supply alcohol to juveniles.
Yes, we have.
But that's what was being called upon by the Police Commissioner and others.
Yes.
Do you think that was a very important recommendation to make?
That's one for government to decide whether it's important, but we believe it was an appropriate recommendation to make.
That was because of the calls that were being made by those people in the community?
No, we considered all factors in that, and I wouldn't put any weight on any particular view.
But the potential for alcohol-related harm to juveniles, that's a big consideration, obviously.
Yes, yeah.
WA already has one of the tightest kind of liquor licensing acts in the country. Can the public expect your recommendations to be along the lines of that be further tightened?
I think you ought to read the recommendations. I don't want to comment on particular recommendations or the thrust of those. I believe we've sought a balance and achieved a balance in the recommendations we've made.
Did you feel any pressure given the media hype about alcohol-related harm?
No.
And the balance of trying to grant small bar licences and things like that?
I didn't feel any pressure. It was a pleasure to be able to undertake this role for the Minister, and we did our best. But I certainly didn't feel any pressure from any quarter.
And what do you hope that will happen from here in terms of government?
I would expect the government will carefully consider the recommendations and respond appropriately. My job's done now, it's over to government.
What about you, Mr.
Before we just ask questions, I'll just go through the process here that will take place. Just the process from here, from government, is over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I want to make sure that all the stakeholders and the industry groups have an opportunity now to read the report thoroughly, time to go through the findings, the recommendation, how it affects them, and to absorb that. I'll be contacting all the major groups in a couple of weeks' time to set up meetings. I gave a commitment that I would meet with them once the report came out. So in line with the consultation and the input that John and his committee have had, I want to make sure that I now get direct that input from them with their particular thoughts on it, so that at the same time, obviously, government will be going through this report as well. I will then formulate a detailed submission for Cabinet. I'll take it to Cabinet, which will obviously give it their full consideration. Once they've reached a position, we will respond and we will then draft legislation. And I'm very hopeful that I can introduce that legislation into the spring session of Parliament. Now, there's other factors around that and priorities, etc., but that's my aim. Just before we finish and I take questions, can I just take the opportunity to thank the public and all the stakeholders of different groups that made submissions, that took time to meet with the review committee. I want to thank them very much, because we really wanted to get a feel from the community before we make decisions, because there's no doubt that the Alcohol and the Liquor Act affects most people in this state in one way or the other. So now I really look forward to following that process. And John, just thanks again for the role. I really appreciate it.
Have you got a timeline for which you'd like to have the Cabinet submission in?
I haven't got a strict timeline, other than to say that in a couple of weeks I'll contact those groups. I would then organise meetings with them straight away. I don't want it to drag on. We will need a little bit of time ourselves to go through, and there's a lot here and a lot in here to absorb. Excuse me, to absorb, and then we will make our informed decisions.
Beyond legislative change,
Excuse me. Yeah.
Is it likely that the outcome of that will require additional resources from government?
I haven't got to that stage. That may well be, and that's something the government will consider. I've been really pleased with the process that's taken place and the independence of it, but also the involvement of the community, and that's why I'm really looking forward to this next stage, so I, as Minister, can get that real good feel, and then we'll formulate and take to Cabinet.
But but it's clearly your intention to get legislation in this year.
I would like to have the legislation in this year. I think that's what we'd really like to happen. So I'm hopeful that will happen.
Is passage this year too ambitious?
Probably. The one thing I think, as John, the committee, would have found that when it comes to the Liquor Act and issues around liquor, everyone has different opinions, etc. And John used the word balance. It's something that I've tried to use a lot when talking about alcohol, and that's our aim, is to strike that right balance. Where that balance is probably depends a bit on how people look at it. So I would expect a really robust debate in the Parliament, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. And can I say that this report now is online, so it's up on the DRGL website, so the public can go to it. I would expect that there'll be a lot of debate and discussion in the media and in the general public, and I really welcome that debate, and I look forward to listening to that debate myself, and I look forward to getting something to Parliament later this year.
Without looking at the recommendations, we did just hear that the secondary supply laws for juveniles is one of the recommendations. That's a sensible recommendation, isn't it?
I've always felt that secondary supply, the intent of what was put forward in secondary supply, I support. I did have concerns about how you did that without creating problems. I haven't read what's put forward here, but I'll read that with interest, and along with the other 140 recommendations that will be given full consideration.
With those recommendations, do you go through them individually?
Yep, me and my staff will be going through them, and I'll read through them all myself. And my staff obviously go through them, and other members of government will obviously go through them. John and his committee have done such a thorough job. We now need to make sure that we examine it, and with the consultation to come and the process to follow, I think we will take good legislation to the Parliament, and the final test, of course, is the Parliament, and that's the way it should be.
Is it going to be hard to work through those secondary supply legislation, or you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, depending on what the report is, what the decision is. I can't comment one way or the other what that's going to be at this stage.
And the recommendation to give the police commissioner powers to go in and catch people selling alcohol to juveniles. We know that was debated through the media. The police commissioner wants it. Looks like that recommendation's been made.
If that recommendation's been made, then that will be given full consideration. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks.